Welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the show where we hold our heads high and our middle fingers higher. I'm your host, Kieran McKay. Today, we are so privileged to have Jeeti Pooni with us. Jeeti brings a wealth of experience as a South Asian woman, a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, a motivational speaker, an author, a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. Her journey serves as a guiding light of inspiration, encouraging others to embrace their stories, find their voice, and reclaim their inner strength. Moreover, Jeeti is a passionate advocate for driving cultural change within organizations and communities. Join us as we uncover her remarkable insights and experiences, including her involvement in a high-profile court case, shedding light on childhood sexual abuse. Welcome, Jeeti. What an honor to have you with us. Thank you for giving MFU your time.
Aw, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So you wear a lot of hats. I pointed out a few. Just want to make sure, did I miss anything in the intro? Anything that you want to add in there?
I did also make a documentary.
Yes. Yeah, we had Movie Maker in there, but yes, a documentary. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you've covered it all, and proud to wear all these hats.
Quite the hats. So with these hats, maybe we can sort of start with, if you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
Oh my goodness, 3 words.
Just like get started right away, right?
First word that comes is love, courageous, bold.
Good choice.
Do is pretty in big ways. It's always bold.
Yeah. Go big or go home.
Mm.
Okay, so if we asked your daughters if they were here today, what 3 words would they use to describe their mother?
Oh my goodness. First one would be annoying because I hear it all the time.
No.
Okay, well, if I kind of step into their shoes, they would see mom takes care of it all.
Mm.
Mom's inspiring.
Yes.
And she's a go-getter. She just does it.
I'm so glad that that's how you see how they see you. Because if I could just go to your movie, Because We Are Girls, there was a moment in there where you had your whole family in this tiny little room during your court case. And you were giving yourself a pep talk, your sisters a pep talk, your husband was there, and the girls were there. And I wrote this down because there were some things that I just were like, oh my goodness. And one of the things that really stood out to me was hearing your kids say, and I want to know what that was for you in that moment where they said, by you being here, Mom, and sorry, I didn't directly quote them, but by you being here shows us to never give up and go do what you believe in. I don't know if you remember that moment. And what was that like for you to hear? It's like, the next generation talking as you're trying to break all these intergenerational barriers. And now you have your daughter saying this to you. What was that like for you?
Well, first, it was important for me to convey something my mother had never said to me. So I conveyed to them, my niece was in the room as well, conveyed to my daughters and everyone sitting there how important it is to speak your truth. Mm-hmm. And that no one can stop you from doing that. Not even me. I even pointed that out. To be able to say that to them, oh my gosh, it was such a surreal moment because it had never been said to me. And we were it was right before verdict.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what the verdict would be. We were going to walk into that courtroom and listen to whatever the judge had to say, whether he believed or not or what, right? And I also, coming from me at the same time, was recognizing that, holy shit, My mom never said this to me.
Mm.
And it was all happening in my head at the same time, downloading as I was conveying this message to them. And one thing that didn't get put into the film, it was cut out for some reason. Right in that conversation, I did say, I'm not going to be like my mother. Because I will believe them. When my child comes to me and obviously is yearning for mom to hear, to listen to whatever their story is or whatever experience they've gone through, I would wholeheartedly, with an open heart, listen to what my child has to say and be there for them. And that message coming from my heart to my children's heart, oh, I can't even describe what that feeling's like. It's just a vast openness that exists in that moment, in that space, in time.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's hard to capture in words.
Yeah. Well, what captured me was literally just seeing, like, you know, when you think of glass shattering, just this like barrier breaking. And we're going to the next dimension now. And you know, some of the healing you share in your book and in your documentary and with your sisters came from yourselves. And when you have to find that within you, I can't even imagine the courage and all that it takes. But then to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm healing because I can actually share this with my children. And those of us that have kids, that's sort of what our hope is. We can do better and be better with them. They're the next version. And so when we don't get that from the generations prior, to me, it was like just mind blowing in a way of, you know, my own moment of like, yeah, like where do I find some of this healing for myself? And also some of this hard work that we're doing is to pave a way for our kids. So I'm glad that that part of your, you know, that scene was in there because it was really, you know, amongst many others, very impactful to hear that from your daughters. They could see what you were doing. So that validation that you're getting, I would imagine, would be so powerful from your kids to you as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, before we go into some of the heavy duty, and, you know, this is just a heads up to those listening. I think people know what the topic today is going to be about, but just some trigger warnings for anyone and everyone that needs a break during this conversation. You know, you do what you need to do, but this will kind of be a heads up. But I did want to, on a lighter note, we know a lot about you through your book, through your documentary, through the work you do. But maybe we can start a little bit about like, who is Jeeti when it comes to finding joy? What brings you joy? What are some things that you do that fill your bucket, that help you laugh along this process that you're, you know, forever going to be in while you heal?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. My life, there was a lot of trauma ever since my childhood and growing up. And obviously I broke my silence when I was 37. So, and then the court case. So there's just a lot of trauma in my life. My joyous moments, I mean, I don't think I would have survived if I didn't have those. There's a part of me that's just so Bollywood.
Mm-hmm.
It just is. That's what I grew up with as a child. And it's that filmy aspect. I have this creative aspect to me. I mean, I was a designer at one point where I used to make clothes and I'd bring the East and the West and combine them together. And I started sewing when I was 12 years old. And I'd make all these, you know, wonderful designs that nobody else had. And we couldn't even buy them back then because ready-made does not exist. Right. And then also, like, you know, from that young age of 4 years old, seeing, you know, this massive, huge screen and there's all these beautiful actresses and actors and, you know, they're in their, all these jewels and saris and all of that, the vibrancy of the colors and the fabrics and, you know, the designs. I lived in that. I soaked that in. And I saw that in my imagination. And so the dancing as well. And that's something that I did in my home. And music was a big part of our lives in our house. My dad, in those early 1970s, he had a record player. He had a lot of records of all the hit movies and, you know, you name it. And we used to dance to all those records. So we had seen some of these movies and we'd, you know, us little girls, us sisters, we'd put the record player on and, you know, put it on full blast and just pretend that we were out there, I don't know, on some mountain field or something.
Yeah.
Whatever we saw in the movies, right?
Yeah.
So the imagination was just limitless. And I followed that. And then as sisters, we had a bond. So we always played together. We played a lot outside as well. A lot of games and rode our bikes, skipping, hopscotch, all of that stuff. And then fast forward, all of that came with us. Like we loved, despite our family situation, what it was in the house, it was also nice to be together in a large family. And we used to host as young girls, our friends. So we'd have our own little gidda parties.
Yes, yeah.
Fenty parties, kind of a thing. We'd have those. So we'd mimic all of that.
Yeah.
And then our high school friends used to come over and we'd do this like, a couple of times a year and we'd all dance. So, do the Indian thing. It was neat. But besides that, it was also in myself, there was this desire to achieve, right? So in school, I made sure that I had good grades and stuff. And then I wanted to go on to university and all of that. And it's interesting in a weird way, no matter what was happening to me, I was able to still allow joy in my life and participate in certain events within the family or celebrations or any celebrations outside of our family as well. There was this desire to be alive. I mean, there's really dark moments where I didn't want that, but then there was the opposite as well. So it's like you're living in the dark, but then there's also this light that exists. And it's just so much joy to be in that light, whether it's through dancing, whether it was through music, whether it was through helping mom cook and make the best gulab jamun, because there were no Indian sweets and restaurants back then. And we lived in a small town. So everything was made in the house, whether it was barfi, besan, samosa,
you're making whatever my mouth water right now.
Yeah. So it was participating in all aspects of living. Not just being stuck in that trauma aspect.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And, I think I can relate to this. And maybe there's a lot of us that come from a vibrant community where there are so many moments to celebrate and there's a lot of customs. Like, did you ever find confusion in that, or almost this conflicted place of, even if you look at your home as a symbol, there's good and bad coming out of this. And so did one sort of take over the other ever for you in terms of, okay, two things are happening simultaneously, good days, bad days. And so how did you work through that or manage that?
Just day by day survival. It was a whole smorgasbord of confusion.
Yeah.
First of all, I came when I was 4. So I'm, coming from India, and then you're put into a small little town. Predominantly white. And then I started school here, kindergarten, didn't know the language, didn't fit in, didn't belong. And then there was all the bullying and all of that aspect. And our teachers, obviously, I mean, we're all immigrants here. So their parents or forefathers, they immigrated from Europe. So they had their own European upbringings and stuff like that. So a lot of it was really strict and not an understanding of us brown people. It was just, it was all confusion. Not being able to read properly, not being able to do the math and all of that. And I was an ESL.
No,
until
100%, man. I was born here, but they look at your name and my siblings laugh so hard. Remember when we get put in that small room every year? And then my brother's like, man, I looked forward to that room because they just let you off the hook and gave you candies. But totally, as we joke about it, but absolutely, you're genuinely learning the language, and that just continued for the rest of us. Put you in the room.
And then it's not just that aspect, like fitting in and learning, how to live in a new environment and getting used to Canada and the small town and, white people and all that. It was also at home, we were supposed to be Indian. Follow our culture. And our dad did not allow us to speak English at home.
Right.
We were punished if we did. And then at school, you have to learn English.
Yeah.
And, you have to learn about the white culture. And how to fit in. It's really weird. It's like you start living this life. Okay, but I'm supposed to be this, but then I'm not supposed to be this. And I'm not supposed to be this here. I'm supposed to be here. And I'm not supposed to be a girl because boys are favored.
Right.
Holy shit, I'm born a girl. And then boys can do this. Girls can't do this. You can't have male friends. You can't play with boys. So there's just so much. And you can't dress this way. You can't wear this. You wear shorts to play sports, but take them off when you're home. Don't wear shorts. Wear your Slavocamies or whatever. So it's just so all mumble jumble. And I just tried to survive day by day.
Yeah.
And I'd get in trouble from my parents, like from my dad or my uncle. They'd sit there, they'd mock me and make fun of me, and then or ridicule me. And then you go to school and you're kind of ridiculed by some of the bullies and all of
Mhm.
that stuff. And you just learn how to kind of slump your shoulders
Mhm.
and make sure that you're not seen so you don't get in trouble. You don't get in trouble at school, so you don't get in trouble at home. Okay, it's best to be in your room when dad's home. Dad and uncle worked 2 days night shift and
Yeah.
2 days day shift in the lumber mill.
You're right.
So when it was day shift, we were like, oh my God, they're going to home.
Yeah.
Two
Yeah.
weeks would just like, oh, drag by. But
Yeah.
whenever it was night shift, they're at work. It was like we ruled the house,
Yeah.
right? Us
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah. Totally. I hear you. Yeah. There's all the funny little things that you try to think you can get away with in that time. So you learn, right? Like you said, you learn how to adapt. And you, as kids, your eyes are the widest, I feel, as kids. You observe in a way because you just don't know. So you're just observing all these things. And so, you learn how to walk into a room and figure out how to survive, as you're saying, and whether it be at school or at home. However, these things carry with us. Like who we are as kids impacts our relationships as we grow as teenagers and adults and all that. And so do you find that some of those things sometimes you bring along in your relationships, whether it be with colleagues, friends, or your husband even, where you're like, oh, this is coming up from my past? How do you manage that?
Oh, goodness. My records play all the time. So basically, we build all of these limiting beliefs from our childhood, right? Through the environment that we're brought up in, through how our parents discipline us or punish us or reward us or however we want to call it, or how the culture does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it all starts from our mom's womb ever since, we're conceived. Like the messages that come in just bombard us. Oh, is it going to be a girl or a boy?
Mm-hmm.
I hope it's a boy. Hope it's not a girl. And my mom had I was the second girl, right? So, and I had a brother that was about a year and a half older than me, but he passed away soon after birth. And so then you're in your mom's womb and there's all this, all these downloads of whatever the heck she's going through. And one of them is, okay, I hope this is a boy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you're born, and then you get messages from the outside world, including your family home, your parents, that you're not good enough. Oh, it'll be a boy next time. Too bad this time, kind
Yeah.
of a thing. And then you're a girl, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. And then we have a lot of unworthiness that's drilled within us, undeservingness. So we take all these experiences and we formulate our own beliefs, and including those that are imposed on us, and they carry with us all
Yeah.
our life. So I have my triggers, and I've become aware of them. So when you're on this journey of what they call waking up or become awakened, it's like just learning, who am I, what self is, and where is it that some of these, like for instance, if I reach out for a piece of bread instead of going to my desk and starting to say write a paragraph in my book or something. Okay, so where is that coming from? Your actions, you kind of start observing your actions, and from that there's just so much awareness.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm doing this because I feel guilty for da, 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 da. So having more bread is going to make me feel more guilty. My guilt record's playing here. and
Totally.
and once you start understanding more about yourself, you have this inner awareness, it's easier then to invite a change into your life. Like you would take another action that would kind of help stump that. So becoming conscious is the first step.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time with myself, on myself, and I continue to do so because healing is a lifelong journey.
Mm-hmm.
There's no
Mm-hmm.
such thing as you're healed. That'll continue until my, last breath. And the triggers will always be there. It's just that I have tools now, different types of tools. I use, so many different modalities to get myself back into that place of connection within self, into my connection with, who Jeeti is, my own divinity, right? And to be connected with the oneness. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very well said. If I could just shift gears for a second. We mentioned earlier in your intro, you've traveled and spoken to audiences worldwide. I'm curious, is there a particular moment or interaction with an audience member or even through your socials, your book launch, like someone from the outside, coming to you and maybe sharing something impactful or something that really stood out to you in this process? Has anything come to light or a story?
There's so many. There is just so many. I think the biggest thing, no matter where I go, that I get, and it really moves me every single time, is how much, whether it's the documentary or the book, or someone hearing our story in a news article, it's how much it's impacted them.
Mm.
And there's people that come up to us and say, you saved my life. And I just did what I did because of, that's what was wanting to come out from inside me. I call it, well, they call it a soul's calling, but when you're connected to that knowingness that's inside you and that guides you, when you're connected to that and then you take action from that place, well, hello, of course this film was going to do so well, because it's made from that place of love, of genuinely wanting to share your story, and of course we have the hopes it's going to help someone. But when someone comes and says that to you,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it was 5 years ago when the first film came out, or if it's now when do book launches here and there.
Yeah.
It's just really moving, and it makes it all worth it. It's like it's being in this place of just immense honor that I'm able to do this work.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people, especially people from the South Asian community, when I say you are hope. You and your sisters are so much hope and inspiration for many of us, girls, women, and even men who are trying to break some of those toxic barriers and maybe just like you with your daughters, be a better man to their children. I have 2 boys. So teaching our boys what is consent and what is power and control and all these kinds of things, I feel privileged to do. And I feel like I can because of people like you that have said, nope, we need to get out there and we need to, middle fingers up, get out there and share our story, and, share it loud and proud, because there are many out there that don't know how to, and it takes people like you to step up for many of us. So I'm glad to hear that you're getting something from that feedback from your supporters, your followers, because even in my own household or with family or friends that have seen the movie or have read the book, when we engage in conversation, it's just like, so it takes that disheartening piece out and brings in this light of hope that, okay, there can be change in small steps. The fact that we're just able to recognize the fact that this book exists and we open it and we read it. There's so much power behind that self-reflection. I have a family member that my father, who is such a big supporter, has a lot of love in his heart for you and your sisters and your story. And so there's some questions that he's actually sent my way. He finished your book and wanted me to ask these. So throughout, I'm going to bring out Papa's questions and we'll go there in a minute. But before we do that, let's go into our middle fingers up. So I want to know, what did you bring today to put your middle fingers up to?
Oh, okay. Middle finger up to, I'm a girl, so I can't do this and I can't do that.
2 fucking middle fingers up to that. I also didn't apologize to you before we started. I swear a lot, so my apologies now.
It's all good.
Anything you want to add to that? Not my swearing, but your middle fingers up.
Well, like I said, I know coming into this earth, it's like, okay, you're born a girl. And then you live your life through that lens. Oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. And I'm wrong. I'm doing something wrong just because you're born a girl. And we just talked about it a few minutes ago. And to undo these limiting beliefs, oh my goodness, it just takes such
Mm-hmm.
immense growth and work every single day to create new neural pathways. And like I carry a lot of guilty. What? Why? What for? Well, because I'm born a girl. Holy shit. Yeah. So all of this stuff just gets placed on your head, just the fact that you're a girl. And I am here to live from my place of the divine self that I am, from that place of divinity as a girl. Okay. That's what I'm labeled as, from society. Or if I was a boy, I would have done it that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here to express my divinity. And if it's being labeled as a girl, then I'm here to live that.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing's going to stop me from living it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And if there's things just by, culturally or society wise, oh, you're a girl, you can't do this and you can't do that, you can't do this, or the shame, like for instance, being, sexually abused. Why the hell should I carry all this shame?
Mm-hmm.
What's the essence of who I am? I'm innocent. I'm a soul. I'm, was just born pure like anybody else. So if something happens to me, why is that crown of shame being bestowed on my head?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here to put my middle finger up to all of that stuff, whether
Yeah.
anybody believes me or not, right?
Well, you got a believer right here, right next to you, because I was actually talking to, I think it was my dad the other day about this too. I'm like, the thing that blows my mind is like we all came out of a vagina. Like we all came from a woman. That's one thing that every single living human have in common. Yet we leave it at that the minute that birth happens and forget that process. And like, I'm here because of a woman. And it turns into all these other things that you've mentioned and more. All women share this, and women of color have a little bit of a different layer to that too, being part of colonizers and trying to make sense of, generations of this passed on to us too, of because I'm a woman of color, I have to look at myself even in a different lens. And I think there are people like you out there that are helping us and helping, the men, the fathers, the older generations, whatever generation you are, I think start to question some of these things. Like, where do these concepts come from? And are these part of our values? Like, how did we get here? Who put this in our head? How do we, move forward? Because we're going to keep being born. And for you to stop that cycle, I remember in your documentary, I don't know if it was Kira or you that said, what is a cost to breaking the cycle? That really stood out too, because as you're trying to debunk a lot of these beliefs and customs and rituals and however you want to put it, starts to sometimes feel isolating, or again, that added guilt and shame of, should I be saying this? Because I am a girl. Should I be standing up in those heels high and tall and fighting for us? Because again, I am just a girl. And so it's a constant battle, I think, in many of our minds, and the guilt and shame, like you put it so well, the guilt and shame, why are you carrying that? Like, have you answered that? Have you answered that question you asked a couple minutes ago that you've been wondering about?
Well, I let go of that when I was 37 years old and broke my silence. The minute that I had all these horrible things said to me by my perpetrator's sister, and enough that it shifted something inside me right away in my brain that made me realize, holy shit, I've had this all wrong.
Yeah.
I thought I had something to do with what he was doing to me and stuff, or I must have consented in some weird way, even though I was a child, right?
Well, you sat too close to him.
I sat too close to him. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then I liked the attention at some point. Do you know what I mean? Oh, so you're guilty of this, right? When she said all these horrible things, which included, I'll just share a little bit, that after having, all this sex, now you're complaining, right? So after having all of this pleasure with my brother, actually, that was the word. After having all this pleasure with my brother, now you're complaining. And I was like, okay, this is not right. She's got it all wrong in her head. I mean, what 10, 11-year-old, wants to have sex? And in her mind, what she felt and fired back was, well, there's plenty of 10, 11-year-olds. that want to have sex. And I was just like, oh my God, this woman just got it all wrong. Anyways, that shifted something inside my brain. And I knew I had to speak my truth because that was not the truth at all. And the minute I decided that, I was able to align within myself with that knowingness. And then I took the step from that place to break my silence, to tell my husband, to tell my parents, and fast forward and take steps to go to the police and all that later. But if I hadn't seen that in myself, that holy, I was innocent. What is this woman talking about? I was only 11 years old. So if I wasn't able to see that innocence of that little Jeeti and the innocence of my sisters and connected with that knowingness, within, that was telling me, basically, I just heard it once. Okay, it's time for you to tell the truth.
Yeah.
So I told my husband the truth. If I hadn't connected with that guiding system and that innocence of that little Jeeti, I would still be carrying that shame. I would still be carrying that blame. And had my cousins, like that sister of his, had not said all those mean things to me, perhaps I wouldn't have made the shift yet. So it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't hate her for it. It's great. It's helped me evolve as a person, right? And be out there in the world doing this work and understanding myself and not blaming myself and not shaming myself, and that I'm not tarnished. And I do deserve to live a good life despite whatever my story has been, despite what's happened to me, whatever experiences I've been through. I am a divine spark, and nothing that happens to me or my body can ever change that.
Yeah.
And there's no man-made rule. You were saying that, your dad, like these questions that are popping up is like, who makes all these beliefs up? And, like as a culture, what values do we take forward, and what do we leave behind that no longer serves us? Well, these are all man-made beliefs.
Yeah.
We've made them, and we have the power to change them and adopt new ones that help all our children thrive, all women and men thrive.
Yeah.
Whether they've been abused or not. And it's what lens do we use now to view the world and to view those that have suffered in silence. One of the things that really stood out with a follower that emailed about my book was that the book allowed her to make sense of what was happening to her and to put into words. She said she could never put it into words. She could never articulate it and process it in her mind. So the book actually gave her the verbiage and the understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she can now just not only kind of see, oh, okay, this is what happened to me. This is how old I was. Oh, this is exactly the process that I went through that you can witness in the writing of the book.
Right.
So that's why I wrote it in such detail in that way, starting from my little self, so people can get an open view into the mind, the psychology of someone who's going through this stuff step by step.
Right.
That's why I shared so many details, which I know a person, it's very hard to share.
Yeah.
It's never done before. I've never picked up a book that, been in that detail. And that's why I self-published.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to speak my truth and I wanted to say it all. And traditional publishing wouldn't allow me that.
Doesn't that blow your mind? Like, we watch these R-rated movies that have the most violence and gore. You can watch someone's head being blown up and blood and, parts of their brain are all on you. But as soon as a boob pops out or something sexual, whether it's, pleasure sex or abuse sex, whatever it is, that's sex, sexual violence, it's like hard no, turned off. And we just turn the lights off to that. And then we teach everyone around us that that's how we're supposed to deal with it. A, you can't be interested in sex and be curious about it and want to know about your body. And B, when something that's sexual, that's violence that happens to you, you just keep it quiet, figure it out, move along. And in some ways, it actually brings me, if you don't mind, to my middle fingers up. I just want to share, mine's going to be a little bit different. I'm just going to ask some questions to everyone listening today because I've been doing a lot of my own reflection lately, and maybe this will be helpful. But my middle fingers up is going to the statement, but is that what really happened to you? And I feel like many of us have either asked this question at one point when someone is sharing something so vulnerable, or we've asked that of ourselves when something so vulnerable happens to us, like sexual violence. And I just want to put some questions out. I think the change happens from the macro, our societal norms. And so maybe this can help challenge some of us. But when we say something like, but is that what really happened, while someone's trying to share their truth, I just hope we can consider, first of all, a time when you question someone's experience or truth. What underlying beliefs or assumptions led us to doubt that person's account? How might those beliefs of ours have influenced the perception of the situation? So kind of what you were saying, like, where is this action? Where is this belief? Where is it coming from? Breaking it down to who taught me, who taught them? How did I get to this place that I'm going to say to someone who says, I was sexually assaulted, but did it really happen that way? Someone that says, I experienced racism, and we say, but did that really happen? Did he really say that to you? Someone that's experienced abuse, but did that really happen to you? I would encourage all of us to reflect on a time when we were hesitant to believe someone's experience, what our own fears or uncertainties were driven to be this kind of a skeptic in the moment. And what would it take for our approach, for us to approach some of these situations with more openness and empathy in the future when someone is coming to us and sharing their truth, or when we want to also step up and share our truth. And as a collective, like how do societal norms and cultural beliefs influence our willingness to believe or doubt someone's truth? In what ways can we challenge these norms to maybe foster a more supportive and trusting environment for survivors, for people that are speaking up? These were just some questions that I put down on the paper when I was trying to challenge myself about some of my own biases or beliefs about things and people that doesn't make it okay for me as well to think that way. And so I'm not trying to be the victim. I think we all play a part in this. Is how do we lean into these sorts of red flags that go off in us when we want to shut down a conversation and say, nope, nope, nope. Instead of doing that, can we say, yeah, and look into like, why am I having this kind of reaction? What is that about? For you, Jeeti, just considering the role of empathy and in believing in others' experiences, how do you think we can cultivate a deeper sense of empathy to better understand and maybe even validate the experiences of survivors of trauma and abuse?
Well, first, I think it's really important for me to say, like, the silent stoning, which is the title of the book.
Yes.
What are you actually doing by saying all these things that you just mentioned? Well, whether you're doing it to yourself or you're saying it to someone else, right? You're actually silently stoning them. When we think about, okay, well, did it really happen? Oh, are you sure you're not just making it up? Or, well, you have this history of not telling the truth before, you know what I mean? Why should I believe you, kind of a thing? Well, what you're actually doing is taking a stone and throwing it towards that person. And that happens, like I had said before, from the moment we're conceived. It happens in our mom's wombs through, her thoughts and what she's going through and chemicals that are being emitted inside her body. And it happens when we were born, the culture, our parents, and how they try to discipline us, even with good intentions. And then if there's sexual abuse over top of that or other neglect, you're silently stoning that baby, that child. And fast forward, say the bullying or whatever else happens when the child grows up, the child learns, okay, I'm grown up now, I'm an adult now. We start to believe all of that stuff that happened and that I am no good, I am unworthy. So we start stoning ourselves. So for the person who's actually sitting on the other side of someone who's sharing their story and you just shut them down or shut them off because you're triggered, you don't want to listen to it. There's ways of, rather than just total, cut off and shut down, or why should I believe you aspect, or you're to blame anyways. Why were you out with him that late? Or why did you even sit beside him? Like my dad said, right? So for one, acknowledge that you are, you're stoning the other person. And then second of all, what does it evoke inside you, like you had mentioned?
Yeah.
Is there perhaps an experience in your life? If you're being triggered, follow the feeling. Where does it lead you? Does it lead you to, lead you to a place of shame within your own self? Oh, okay, I feel shame. Well, what are you feeling shame for? Where is that shame coming from? Sometimes we're able to pinpoint it, sometimes we're not. So it's just our job to notice.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of going to blame, right? Blaming the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you were supposed to be here at 3:00, and that's why this happened to you because you showed up at 5. Right.
Yeah.
So as a culture, as a person who's sitting on the other side of someone who's been abused and that person's sharing that story, the number one thing you can do is listen to help that person. If you truly want to help your friend or your relative or your son or daughter, listen and listen from that heart space, not listen just for the sake of, oh, okay, they're going to be done their story.
Mm-hmm.
Listen from that place of love, of compassion, without judgment, knowing that that person, all that person wants is to be heard and seen. That person is not looking for you to sit there and, give them a whole therapy class.
Totally.
Or psychology 101 or whatever else. They've just never been heard. And it could be that this person is telling about their trauma or whatever experience they're sharing with you for the first time. And how you react will, in fact, shut them down further. Mm-hmm. If that's what you're going in as, without the listening ears, without that open heart. And if you're not in the place or the space to do that, be honest with that person. I'm sorry, I'm not resourced enough to hear this right now. I love you. And if you want to be able to hear that story and listen to that person when you're in a more resourced place, be honest. Well, can we talk about it tomorrow? Or how about we have coffee first thing in the morning? Instead of, okay, this happened, you've talked about it, now get over it.
Yeah.
You don't just get over something like this. Healing there's no straight line.
Yeah.
And there's, what works for one person might not work for the next person. There's so many different modalities. What might work at one point in time might not work at another point in time,
Mm-hmm.
right? It depends on the different layers that we're at in our healing journey. And there's different emotions that come up for different people. For some people, they're stuck in grief and sadness. Some people, they're stuck in anger.
Yeah.
For some people, they're, don't have compassion or empathy for themselves. So when you tell someone to get over it, our court case, from beginning to end, it was a good 14 years from when we first went to police. And then that was in 2007 when we first reported it. And then to 2021 is when the appeal court, our case was going through the appeal court. And it's 14 years later. And in between, it's like when somebody tells you to get over it.
Yeah.
You don't know what that person's going through. I had my why as to why I was doing it. When I entered the criminal justice system, it became more about than just me and my sisters. It became, about other women and other boys or girls or men that are going through the system. Holy shit, they're going through exactly what we're going through. Well, we don't want it to be this way for them. Mm-hmm. So we stood up and we challenged certain things in the justice system. When we were asked for our counseling records, I was like, there's nothing in there, just give them over. And then I had to think twice about it. And I was talking to these women from Rape Relief, and they're like, Jeeti, are you sure that's what you want to do? And then it was brought to my attention as to what precedent we'd be setting in the criminal justice system. Because if in our court case, the records are just handed over, then it would be expected in other court cases. Okay, so then we spent money from pocket to stop our records from being looked at. It would have saved us time and money if we had just handed them over.
Right. Maybe help people hear what was the motivating factor behind why you didn't, because you said, yeah, you could have easily done that, but it saved you time. But what were you guys hoping to achieve when you chose to not hand them in?
Well, it's the precedent that you're setting then. Then you're just making it easier for any other person to file an application, and they would use our court case saying, oh, look, these people did it. By taking a stand, you're helping other people in the system, in the sense it's not so easy for defense then to just ask for counseling records. And so when I learned that by just handing it over, we're actually kind of, messing up other people that are going through the system. I was like, holy, that's not right. And then it just became more like the more time we spent through the system, it just opened my eyes as to how big this was. And it's not just a story about me and my sisters. It's about a story about all survivors. It's about story about everybody that's been harmed and is pursuing the justice system for some sort of justice.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in the end, the outcome that we got, he was found guilty, right? But then the court case, it was stayed because of his defense tactic at the end, which was to claim his rights were breached, right? As his human rights were breached in the sense that there wasn't a timely trial. We stuck it through, we did not waver, and we knew how important it was, no matter what the guilty verdict was, no matter how things continued on from there. Even if it was not guilty, we would stand strong. And it's just the fact that we were able to tell our story, our truth, speak our truth, and hold him responsible, because nobody else could. Our parents didn't. Nobody asked him. The police took their time, right? It was 4 years later that he was charged after us giving our plea statements, right? And then even the criminal justice system, in the end, the case was stayed. So who was going to hold him responsible, right?
Yeah.
So my sisters and I did that by him having to show up in court and listening to what we had to say and what he had done to us.
Just like the amount of strength, inner strength, I don't know the word, belief in yourself, the community you'd have to have around you, whatever it was that would take a victim to have to go through that. You're already in a vulnerable state because you're going to court and saying this happened to me. I was sexually abused for these amount of years, as were my sisters. And then the amount of work as the victims you have to do to help the bigger picture is mind-blowing. My sister-in-law is a lawyer, and I was just picking her brain after the movie. How is it that the defense could play that tactic when they were pushing the case back? There are a lot of holes in the system where, you want to bring him in there and hold him accountable. And it shouldn't have to be the victims and you asking for that or wanting that or advocating for that. But unfortunately, that's what happens. And that is also why cases of sexual abuse are so underreported, because so many people don't have that kind of strength or capacity to sit through that. You're torn apart. Like you said, big part of the counseling records in my mind would be protecting the victim's dignity. These are vulnerable moments that a victim is having with their therapist, and maybe only their therapist truly knows the real feelings of what you go through. And here we are saying, oh, we need these to strengthen the case. And so you just hear more and more about, I'm not believed, I'm not believed, I'm not believed. And so how did you and your sisters work through that and rise above that and say, fuck that, this is beyond us. We have to fight for this. We have to fight for the other people. Like, for 14 years, did you guys go through a process like that? And how would you say you came out on the other end?
I was able to stick through it. And obviously my sister stood alongside because I knew my truth. No, but I would not waver from that truth. I know what happened to me in the system. It's not that we're not believed. It's that we're liars. So the system is created to paint you as the biggest liar on earth. And that whatever my sisters and I were alleging didn't really happen. And it was, in reverse, a different story, right? That he was painting. And the minute you step into the criminal justice system, you are forced to defend yourself. And coming from a place where you've been, victimized and horrible things have happened and there's all this trauma, that's not how I feel it should welcome people like myself who've been through stuff. So there's these systems that are made. Yes, they're made 500 years ago, 600 years ago. Again, I say we have the power to change all that. We've made these systems, right? As humans, and we have the power to change it. It's people don't read about this stuff. People don't sit in the courtrooms to see what happens. If somebody sat in our court case every day and whether it was a lawyer or a journalist or something and, wrote every day as to exactly what was happening, people would be blown away.
I bet.
And that's what I hope. I do hope. I see this as a trilogy. Like the first book is about my story, right? The Silent Stoning. And I do hope I still have it within me to write a second book, which would be about the court case.
Well, you better have it in you.
Yeah. Gong show on its own. And that's why I didn't put too much about the court case in this book.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's a book on healing.
Yeah.
And, how to move forward. How do you step into your innocence and how important that is? We're born innocent, but I see so many I do see so many parallels. I wanted to back up for a second with the culture that we come from, like my Indian culture, and then the criminal justice system. They're all there to suppress you. They both do the same thing. They suppress your voice. They traumatize you further. Yes, you're not believed and you're made out to be the biggest liar. And it's to just keep generations of how things have always been, to keep the status quo. Right. So there's our culture. It's not just the men in our culture that do that. It's also the women in our culture. And then in the justice system, here we have the judges, then we have the defense lawyers, and the defense lawyer that started his case was a female. So this is a female asking you these questions and treating you in a certain way, which I think is disrespectful as a female. So there's just so many parallels.
Yeah.
And I see similarities in both. And they're both, I believe, the limiting beliefs that carry forward in my culture, and then this whole justice system. It's all just dinosaur systems that are broken and need to be, reevaluated, and new systems need to be implemented.
Totally. And I think with, stories like yours and your sisters and other brave people out there, when we find the courage to speak up or share our story, I think it's like a response, like a chain reaction or chain response. Like we just build a thicker chain, and these stories contribute to the bigger change that we're trying to make as a collective, whether it be in the courts, the schools, society, our culture, or whatnot. The less we say about what we've experienced, the less we can make some of those changes. And so I know it's not that easy. Sharing our stories are complicated and tough, and there's lots of things to do with that. But I'm very appreciative of those that are finding a way to speak up, whether it's to even share it within yourself. Sometimes we suppress it within ourselves. And when we can find that and say, that did happen to me, I do believe in myself, I'm not a liar. Yes, it really did happen that way, whatever it is. If we can start with ourselves, I think we're on the path to what you're saying, where, the light of hope and change. I just want to say to you one thing, and this comes from my dad, and I want to make sure I say this before we conclude at some point here. Just going back under, we're talking about understanding and validation. He wanted me to tell you that this is his words. So he says, first of all, tell Jeeti on my behalf, I believe her and in her. She wrote the book from her heart and spoke the truth. When you hear people walk alongside you and talk about believing, the opposite of lying, like what can that do for you? What can that do for others out there that are suffering in silence?
Wow, it opens a lit path, to be honest with you. It opens a lit path, not into just reaching out for help, but also going inside, right? And reaching into that innocence that you are, that there are people out there that are willing to believe you, or just believe you without you even having saying a word, and that understand the horrors of sexual abuse and incest that exists in our community, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like lighting a path, to be honest with you, for thousands of others without even them uttering the word me too, or it's happened to me, or you know what I mean? And you had just mentioned a few minutes ago about these stories that we don't kind of acknowledge within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I want to add that what you suppress will express and manifest itself in your life in some shape or form, whether it's through disease, whether it's through some other, a horrible thing coming your way, whether it's depression, you name it. It's really important to acknowledge at least to yourself. Not everyone has to go on a loudspeaker and, make a documentary and announce that this has happened to me. But as long as you acknowledge your own story and honor it, these experiences come our way. As horrific as they are, they come our way, and then we grow from there, right? And we learn things about us, and it's like that path, that light that we just talked about, that gets lit back into that connection to self.
Mm-hmm.
So when there's people out there, it's great, but first the work has to start within you.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be 1,000 people like your dad, saying, oh, this is great, I believe you. But if you're not willing to go there and believe yourself and connect with, that divinity, that innocence, that knowingness that exists inside you, then that lit path out there,
Mm-hmm.
it won't light you.
Oh, that's so well said. Internal and external measures. And unfortunately, we live in a world where external measures are what we rely on. You look good, you drive this car, you make this, all these sorts of things that we think fill us, and inside we can be so empty. And your boss can tell you you're a great employee, but if you don't feel like you're doing it, then your husband can tell you you're a beautiful woman, and if you don't feel like it, all these sorts of things, like you're saying, I think we all experience to some degree every day, where what will it take for me to find that within me and believe myself? So for anyone listening that really truly wants to get there, what would be one thing that you would suggest to them that could help them start to find that inner peace, that belief within, start to work from within?
Find that innocence within self. It is your birthright. You are born innocent. Find that connection to that. There is that seed inside you. The minute you connect to that, I can only talk from my experience. I mean, my whole life changed. The way I saw myself changed. And when people like your dad step up, a person like me in the place that I am now, I embrace that light. Mm-hmm. I embrace his hand. And if, there's thousands of others like him out there, oh my God, then we are changing the world. But that step starts inside self. No therapist can put it inside you. They can't change your, psychology. They can't do your therapy for you. No other person can do it. No matter how many accolades you have or achievements you have under your belt. If you're not coming from that beautiful place, that is your birthright. That is your divine right of pure innocence, pure love, pure awareness. Then finding healing will be difficult, I feel. You'll live all your life in suffering. I mean, I'm not saying I'm healed. I'm not saying that, I don't have moments where I'm in, my hole, in my shit. It happens to me. Sometimes it happens to me, more than once a day. Sometimes it happens to me, every other day. Like, you don't know when you fall into the hole. You just kind of do.
It was like you said, progress is not linear. It's not a straight line, like you said. Yeah.
And it's important if one wants to not live in that suffering, then you have to find the truth of exactly, who you are. What are you doing here? What am I? And I connect with that divine essence.
You speak about the innocence, and maybe we can shift your book for a second. First of all, how did it feel to see your story in print? What was that like?
I cried when I got the first copy of my book. It was the proof copy. And I looked at it. I'm like, holy shit, I did this. I wrote this. Oh my God. And it was just, it, it felt like I honestly was in awe of myself, but then in disbelief too.
How come?
That I did this and I wrote this,
Yeah.
and oh my God, it's so beautiful. It looked beautiful. And I had spent, years on this. The book I had written in 2017, and I wanted to publish it before the verdict. But then certain events took place. And then in my mind, I'm like, I'm just going to put this on hold. And then fast forward during COVID is when I picked it up again. But then so much had happened with the documentary and all of that stuff. And, and I was speaking. And then I decided to add more to the book, right? As to the verdict itself and what happened with that, and the coming out of the documentary and the reactions worldwide, blah, blah, blah. So I had to add. And then it was just even writing the letters to little Jeeti. Oh my gosh. It allowed me to go there in those moments of time and writing the story as to what happened, so she could hear and see that she's being heard and seen. So every letter that I wrote to her is a validation that little Jeeti is being heard, is being seen, and I see, how traumatizing it was for her, and that I love her, and that I believe her. And I also knew, I wanted to write the book in a different way. I just didn't want it to be like, a narrative, here's my story. So I decided to write letters to my little self back in, I think it was 2014 or something. I had been able to make a connection with that little Jeeti in my therapist's office. And I remembered that. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this book by writing letters, right? And I decided to start with little Jeeti. And then from there, I wrote letters to other loved ones and, other people that have impacted my life. And in the act of writing a letter itself, it is just such a personally connecting way to get the information through to the reader. Because obviously, when I was reading the letters, I was like, oh my God, me reading as a reader feels, oh, it's written to me. And then the reader would be able to go back to their innocence and their childhood and their reflection. So that was my purpose of, writing it in this way. And I feel the innocence of little Jeeti had to be spoken to and through. And it has through the letters in every stage of her life will be received by the reader, right? At that different development stage. Because you're a child, and this child is speaking. Like, okay, dear Jeeti, this happened to you, you were only this old. So that takes the reader out of that blame aspect. She's a woman. How does she at one point not know, right? She could have done this, could have done that. It takes you back to the childhood, that child, that psychology as to how it affected her at that moment. And the best way is a heart-to-heart connection via the letter. And nobody writes letters anymore.
No, that's
it's a lost art.
True. So true. I honestly was not expecting it when you and I had a little FaceTime to see if we could do this interview, and the book was on its way, and you're like, I won't ruin it for you. Just read it. So when I opened it, I was like, I just personally am such a big supporter, having my own trauma and also working in crisis and trauma for so many years, and young people, adolescents, parents, everyone. Like, the one thing that we can all connect to again is where we came from and how we started. And when you talk about the innocence and the way you do, we lose that as we get older, because we're told, like, as you've talked about today, and in all sorts of ways, we trick ourselves. All sorts of things happen along the way. We have these crappy experiences, whatnot, that take us so far from that innocence. Yet, when you look at it in the simplest way, when you're learning, let's say, a new language, there's innocence in that. You're learning a new job. There's innocence in that. And you're allowed to screw up, not know, ask stupid, questions as you think they are, but no question is stupid. And we experience these innocent moments as we get older, but we don't connect to it in the same way. And when I opened your book and started with, little Jeeti, young Jeeti, and then there was adult Jeeti, and, I don't want to ruin it for everyone. There's, like you said, all sorts of letters. Man, I know I shouldn't have done it and I would not recommend this, but I read that book from start to finish in less than 3 hours. I couldn't put it down, and it was probably not good because it opened a lot of doors, and I was bawling, I was laughing, I was crying, it was all the things. You spoke to me as well, and you did what you, I think, set out to accomplish for yourself, and taking that time for yourself. You were so genuine, authentic that how could you not reach the rest of us? Like, I could tell you weren't writing this for anyone but yourself, and you let us in. If sibling steals their sibling's diary, I felt like I got to read your diary and in some ways, go back and remind myself of, my own stuff. And that to me was the most brilliant thing that I think could have happened for anyone that's experienced trauma or is learning about their trauma, is going back and having those conversations, if possible, with ourselves in those moments when the people that were supposed to protect us couldn't, wouldn't, didn't, however we want to, experience that or how we did. That part of us lingers and it doesn't go away. That, like we said earlier, who we are is going to impact from the minute we come out later on life with whatever adult relationships we choose to be in. And when we don't go back and face some of those things, this is all my personal opinion, they find a way to make us do it in all sorts of ways. Like you said, whether it's through our physical health, whether it's through mental health deterioration, whether it's whatever, we all, I think, can relate to that. So I just want to know, actually, my dad asked this question too. You had a lot of questions between the book and the movie. And there was so the movie, you had some questions, and then your book came out. Do you feel like a lot of those questions are being answered for yourself or have been, or where are you at in this process?
Through this journey, yes, so much has been answered and my eyes have opened up to so much just awareness within myself. And what I've learned is, and through my healing work that I do, that we're all here. It's a journey of self-acceptance. Whatever experiences we have. But can we truly love and accept ourselves exactly the way we are? With whatever story we've lived or whatever trauma we've been through, can we see our innocence? Can we remember the truth that we are, a spark of the divine? And in what I feel is I wake up to self-acceptance every day. Sometimes it's challenging. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just there and it's pure bliss. And that's great. I'm having a good day. And I get triggered. And then I have to go back and remind myself. You know what I mean? So if these experiences happen, so how do you step outside of your experiences and live a life that is full of deservingness, that Jeeti deserves to have it all. Jeeti deserves worthiness. Jeeti is worthy. Jeeti, is a beautiful, luminous spark that's here to, live her purpose. And just shut out everything else. I'm here to live my purpose. Right? And how can I do that? Well, first I have to love and accept myself exactly the way I am, who I am. And I feel we all have some sort of a calling, if you want to call it, or a purpose, right? And in incidences like, sexual abuse, what I've been through, I have a duty, and I have a duty to my daughters. And then I have a duty to, my future generations, my grandchildren. Like, my mom wasn't able to stop this cycle. My mom hasn't even acknowledged it within herself. And I know she has a story. I know. And then, go back to my grandmothers, great grandmothers, my whole lineage. So if you don't mind, can I read something?
Oh my gosh, please. Yes.
This is a poem by Terry Real. It's on page 236 of my book, The Silent Stoning. Family dysfunction rolls down from generation to generation like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to their ancestors and spares the children that fall. So that sums it up. I mean, you started this podcast, talking about my girls, and now we're reaching the end and of this conversation. And that's that's a beautiful place that, just feels so right now. My girls. And if I'm not going to do it for my children, then who the hell's going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just, like I said, the benefit for my kids, it's also their kids. And if I don't take this on, if I don't face the flames, my children are going to burn in these flames. They're going to deal with it. It's going to get passed on. There's intergenerational trauma. Everybody talks about it. The whole, the mice and the cherry blossom studies that they've done, 7 generations forward. The mice have nothing to do with, the electrical current and the cherry blossom smell that gets released, right? So they get zapped with the current. 7 years generation forward, they still feel the effects of those ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
It just automatically does.
Yep.
And here we are. And some of us will be shunned. I'm sure there's, mothers, grandmothers before me that spoke up and broke their silence, and they've had to pay a heavy price.
Yeah.
And my sisters and I, you talked about the cost that was mentioned in the documentary. Of course, there's a cost. There's always a cost to anything. There's a cost to not speaking up, right? The suffering that continues internally, and then the diseases that arise from that, and how things get passed on to our children who will suffer. There's a cost for speaking up. There is. I made the documentary. I didn't think about the consequences. I broke my silence. I didn't think about the consequences that my husband might leave me, and my family will disown me, and I'll lose my child, and I'll never have a home again, and where will I go? I didn't think about all that. I put the book out. I self-published without, there are consequences. But if I get stuck in the consequences that this person's going to come after me, this person's going to come after me, or I can't say this in this way. And I've had people tell me that, members of our community that work in the outreach programs. Jeeti, you can't say it that way. You're generalizing. You're this, you're that. I'm just like, if I'm not going to say it, then who the fuck's gonna?
No, please
I have
please
to say
keep
it this
saying
way.
it. Yes.
I just say it in the way that it, from that place of love, because it's not from a place of blame. And when you speak from the heart, people will hear you from their hearts. And I believe that's why the story of me and my sisters, it resonates with so many people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not coming from a place of malice, and neither is the book. And here we are, people like your dad stepping up, and you're having this podcast. And there's other people out there that have been following, our Pooni sister journey. And this is how we create change.
Yeah.
Bit by bit, and all starts from working on self.
Just beautiful. Like, just so well said, just even the quote that you read, I remember reading that, and, I recently started seeing a therapist, and they support the BIPOC community. So it's nice to have somebody that is also can speak the language in the way that, we grow up with our ancestors. And she asked me, because I'm conflicted in some things. And she asked me, or more said, it sounds like you're trying to figure out what kind of ancestor you want to be. And I haven't stopped crying every time I think of that, because intergenerational trauma, like you said, it's just in so many ways, we're just only learning about this. And like you said, grandmas and maybe even grandpas before us who tried couldn't. And a lot of our community has been in survival mode. And then there's people like you that, show us that we don't have to just survive, we can thrive. And when you speak in the way that you do, and, you recognize there's these consequences. I mean, going to court for 14 years, if you didn't know what consequences you were going to experience, I'm imagining you experience many of them in that time. Like, no one has to tell you what those consequences are. You live with them in your mind every day, I would imagine. And yet you're taking this collective approach of, okay, like we can't just stop at that. Doing nothing is doing something too. And the fact that you've chosen to do something so the next generations and the next have something to build off of, I'll forever be grateful that there are people like you in our community that can step up for those of us that haven't been able to. And when you do that, you just are generating this beautiful, it's like the wave at a game. The best, the Vancouver Canucks just won their first playoff game. That's on my mind. So it's like being at a Canucks game, and you do the wave and you see how many people will follow. And that's what I'm feeling when I read your book, when I watch your movie, when I sit and talk to you. I can't thank you enough. And I know there's a lot of people in the community that feel that way too. So thank you for fighting those consequences and carrying that out and continuing to fight the fight in the good and right way. That's a huge progress, I feel, for, when I had some questions about, like, what do you think are good things that we're seeing along the way? And you kind of named so many of them. Is there anything else that would stand out, for you that when we think of healing and hope, some things that you're seeing that are happening within our community?
Well, I can tell you that since our documentary, our story, went out into the world, there's many more organizations that have opened up that are helping, sexual abuse survivors, or that want to create this dialogue out in our communities. And these are led by the younger generation. These are organizations that, have young blood. And it's so heartwarming to see that. And now there's other documentaries being made after our documentary now. Look at To Kill a Tiger. That just came out.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yes. And of course, our documentary has laid the foundation for other people to approach this subject. Nobody wanted to approach this subject. When I approached the film board, they hadn't made a film on sexual abuse. And I was kind of surprised, but you know what I mean? And now there's another one being made out east. And the Rena Burke story's coming out, right?
Yep, good.
Like there's just so much good that's happened.
Yeah.
And the conversations and, the messages that we get from people is that, oh my God, you've helped me see this in such a different way. And they're able to step into their stories. So the ripples are being carried forward. And I remember about 14 years ago, or 10 years ago, however long it was, I can't even remember, telling Crown Counsel, this court case is just the first. And there's going to be a tsunami of people coming out with their abuse. So now if you look at the civil suits, many people go the civil suit way to find justice.
Yeah.
Well, ours was a criminal court case. And some people write into, asking advice from me. And I'm not a lawyer. I can't offer that kind of advice, right? So look what it's creating. It's creating people to use their voice and to break their silence in whichever way they choose to.
Yeah.
I think we still have a long way to go, though. Yeah. This is just the drop in the bucket. And I do feel like people, whoever paved the way for me in our ancestors or in our, lineage, our culture, my sisters and I, we've planted the seed and we've paved the way. And someone else is probably going to come do it bigger and better than me, which is fine too, and take this, out into the universe as it needs to go. But that's how this is. It's just one drop at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward, we'll be creating different beliefs that help our children survive, right? And thrive.
Okay, well, I think we're going to start wrapping up, even though I could talk to you for 17 more years. And so now you're going to have to just keep coming back. But, before we wrap, anything you wish that I did ask, or, maybe you want to go back or clarify or bring up? Is there anything that stands out for you?
This conversation, you're right. We can, talk until, 6 a.m. in the morning or something.
Yeah.
But I think we've covered a lot. We've touched a lot. And I'm so grateful for this conversation and just your openness. And it just helps a person like me to just kind of be free and express in the ways, in the words in the ways that I want to. So I really want to thank you for that
Oh,
and for giving me this time and space to share my story. The only thing I think that hasn't been mentioned is the book is available on Amazon.
yeah. So I had posted it in a little post the other day, but I will repost where people can find your movie, Amazon
Okay.
Prime, because we are girls.
Yeah,
Uh,
and the Canadian, the National Film Board YouTube channel.
Perfect.
It's free. It's free for Canadians on that.
Awesome. And then your book, it can be on Amazon as well. Amazon, right? Bought on it. That's where I got
It's
mine from.
yeah,
Yeah.
Amazon.ca.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And if you do purchase the book, write a review. I think very helpful for those of us that read it to do it. Because again, these are small things that we can all do to support speaking up and really fighting for those that can't. And so there was wonderful reviews that I had the opportunity of reading before. Actually, I didn't read any until afterwards because I didn't want spoiler alert, but I really thought they were really thoughtful. So anywhere else the book can be purchased?
They can contact me.
Oh, okay, directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can contact me directly and I'll make sure that they get a copy of the book. Obviously, Amazon UK has their own link. Amazon, in the States, they have their own link, and .ca Canada has their own. So just make sure that, you're clicking on the right link.
Yeah, don't
And,
pay for it more in US dollars if you don't have to.
Yeah, I know, especially with the rate right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just wanted to say that, you know what, to all your listeners, thank you, for joining in this conversation and listening. And every person, every being, deserves to live their authentic life and be their authentic selves, right? And I really hope that that the messages that we shared today through this conversation really resonates with them. And then from that place, they can find, their own worthiness and deservingness. It's super important. I can't even say how important it is.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And and for just to add on everyone listening, these conversations are door openers. We're just opening the door to this conversation. You may have something that you want to add or maybe ask or share. So please send your information our way. You know where we are, because we'd like to keep this conversation going and keep that door wide open if possible together. So anything else for you, Jeeti, before we sign off?
No, I want to say a big thanks to your dad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of these questions and some of them got asked and some of them I didn't need to, you answered, but you had suggested he and I get together and do a recording. And so I asked him and, we will, it'll be a hard one for me, but there are some things that I'm trying to, I think, make amends with, from our past with our ancestors and family grandparents that aren't here that I'm trying to find the courage to start talking to my parents about. I don't want regrets when they're no longer here, and sharing stories, asking questions, and also the things that are on our mind. I think sometimes we surface hang out with family members, and when they're gone, we feel like we missed opportunities to have real conversations and learn. And so he and I agreed we're going to get together and have a real conversation. So that'll be coming sometime soon. So thanks to your suggestion.
Oh, that's good. That's great. I mean, think about it. How many, of us are have that privilege of having that heart to heart conversation with dad, right?
Yeah.
And it comes from that open, compassionate place.
Mm-hmm.
You're not there for judgment. I mean, their views are their views. My dad blames me, for the abuse or whatever. Okay, go ahead. I know that's not my truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I still have love and compassion for my dad.
Yeah.
And I see him as this little 2-year-old or whatever that didn't get his needs met as a child, right? All his attachment needs.
Yeah.
And then you see his innocence, and I see my mom's innocence. So coming from that place, when you have these conversations, it's like innocence is sitting in front of innocence.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong question, right? And there's no fault. It just is. So I can't wait to hear that conversation.
Yeah, well,
that will be so wonderful.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you again, Jeeti, for your time.